we're back here, and we're lucky to have Mr. Jim Gio back in the office with us once again. Last time Jim was here was 2 years ago for our first and only holiday podcast, and as Jim brought up, he was our first guest on a shot at Business Central and a beer. So welcome back, Jim.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You know, for the listeners who didn't listen to the first episode a couple years ago, can you maybe tell us a little bit about who you are again and you know, the company that you work for?
Of course. So obviously my name is Jim Gio. I've been in technology industry for over 25 years. I've been at my current company for about 6 years, and I've been working with SSI for over 10. So the company that I work at right now is Triangle Package Machinery Company. We've been around for over 95 years, close to 97 years, making packaging machines, primarily in the food service industry. It's a family-run company here in Chicago. We've been here the whole time, and I came on board with them about 6 years ago with the goal of implementing a new ERP system. And as Ken can tell you, NAV was not even on their radar as the solution that they were picking. They had picked out a few other solutions, and when I came on board and was meeting with them, I had said, you know, have you guys ever looked at this particular product? No one had ever heard of, at the time, NAV, now Business Central. And they were like, no, but they were actually going to use it as just a comparison tool to prove that the ERP system they were going with was the right choice. And after looking at NAV, after Ken had done his demonstration and really just sort of working through the demos and everything like that, it became clear that NAV wasn't really the option, you know, just to prove that our other system was right. It actually buried the other system and became the clear choice of which one to go with. So it's a testament to the program, but also, you know, our relationship with SSI and just, you know, how working with you guys was good for a company like ours.
Yeah, you can't really beat NAV and Business Central, right?
Yeah.
So, and now you do you're I think what is your official title? Director of Information Technology?
Director of Management Information Systems.
Management Information, yeah. So what do you think about all the ransomware going around in this world?
It's very scary. You know, I don't think that there's, you know, any end to it in sight, but I think there's a lot of things that you can do to prevent it.
Yeah.
Simple little Microsoft things like like multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
Very simple thing that you can do to protect yourself.
Yeah, it's definitely scary.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the different, I guess, you know, pieces of the business. So what drives the revenue or the sales? What are the different components of sales and things that you're doing for your customers?
So I think we would actually be divided up into 3 core sections. We have our new machine sales. We have our service, which would be the servicing of the machines that we sold. And then we have our aftermarket parts and accessories. So you have an existing machine of ours, you want to retrofit you know, different parts onto it or modernize it to do these new requirements. So we have the capability of doing that. So those are the 3 core areas of our business. And then we utilize NAV in those ways. You know, we have jobs for that, which is something I think we're going to be diving into, to manage the project management of those. You know, prior to having Business Central in the building, we really didn't know how a lot of that was being tracked. We knew the cost of production, but we didn't actually know a lot of the administrative costs that went behind the scenes, you know, the research and development costs, the engineering costs, just the general project management costs. And we had the production orders to tell us what it cost us to make it. We had the purchase orders to tell us what we paid for components that we had purchased and, you know, subcontracted work that we had done, but we really didn't know what that administrative cost was. And now Jobs has really been able to identify that for us. And for a company like ours, that's really how we're going to move into the future, is understanding those costs and understanding that, you know, what do we need to do? Who do we need to bring on to look at these different areas and put more resources in R&D or put more resources in, you know, project management to keep these things moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that's, so to kind of circle back to a couple of things you just said, which was, right, you've got these different lines of business. One is you're building these relatively complex machines that can take months to build.
Yes.
You're distributing replacement parts or supply, or right, maybe some small parts for existing customers. You're also having to do service.
Yes.
On-site service or repair or maintenance, right? And a lot of times, like, we hear our clients tell us that, well, this system was really good at this. The system was really good at that.
Mhm.
But I think Business Central has components, right? And the ability to handle all those things. And you're actually using multiple of them together. Yeah. So like a customer, right, places a new order for 3 new packaging machines. That is a job.
Yes.
Right? And you have to do engineering.
Yes.
Right, an engineer to order, or right, to ETO type model.
Exactly.
You've got to do a bunch of engineering for some of the components maybe on these machines. You've got other internal costs that you may need to track.
Mhm.
But then you're gonna kick off some production orders
Yes.
onto the manufacturing shop floor, and do your traditional manufacturing, I'm using air quotes,
Of course.
traditional manufacturing type operations, right? And those pieces kind of work together, right, to create that solution.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that most companies like mine look at is just that production cost, because that's really what they view as like the tangible cost. It's like, okay, how many did we make? What were the labor hours involved with it? And you sort of look at the office staff, your engineers and people like that, as just part of your overhead. And really, it does go into the cost of that machine, and what future revenue you can realize off of it. So I think that having that visibility is a huge factor for us, and it's something that I don't think we were mindful of previously, and I think now it's definitely a hot topic for us.
The benefit.
Yes.
So a question to Ken, actually, how common is it for companies to actually use, let's say, jobs and manufacturing together? Is that common?
Yeah, it is. In this engineer to order model where you're building a machine, let's say, right, or some sort of device that's going to be tailored for a client, it's actually pretty common, right? Yeah, because and part of it has to do not just with the operational side of the business, but it's the sales side too. So meaning, right, I get a customer, they want this machine, but they want me to do this customization to it and add this custom component or whatever to it, right? Well, I'm not going to explicitly break down a price for all these different things I'm going to do. I'm just going to tell them, look, I'm going to charge you $250,000 for this. And that's going to include everything we just talked about here. And I'm going to charge you today, I'm going to send you an invoice for $100,000 as a deposit. And you're going to pay that invoice. But I can't recognize revenue yet, right? So I need to track that as like deferred revenue. So that's where jobs comes into play. The fact that, so it has to do also not just with the operational side, but your billing and your revenue recognition and cost recognition and how that flows to your financials. So that's really important for these types of models, so because they cross over multiple months, right?
Okay.
It's not like I'm going to take a job and it's going to be over in 3 days.
Right.
You don't need really jobs in that case because it's all typically happening in one period.
Mhm.
But when you're building a $500,000 machine or whatever it is, right, with all this custom engineering work, that's going to take maybe 3 months or 6 months, or right.
And to Ken's point, so one of the things that we actually use jobs for at the end of every project is to do a cost of goods sold review. So we'll go through the project as a whole. So it's multi-machine, single or multi. You'll go through and you'll look through all of those costs. And this is data that we did not have previously. And just the amount of information that you can glean out of that is just so valuable to the company. It also lets you know for future projects, like, was this a worthwhile project to do? Because you start to look at it and say, okay, here's the unknowns that we went into this project with, and here's the amount of engineering that took to do that particular project. Is it worth it for us and the customer to go forward on a project like this. So it's information you didn't have previously, that really is invaluable when you think about it, in maintaining your business. So those COGS meetings that we do at the end of every sales wrap, or I'm sorry, order wrap up, really give us that view of that. And jobs module definitely gives us that visibility that we'd never had before.
That's so interesting to hear you say that, because one of the things that companies tend to struggle with is that closeout, that wrap up. And it's not, they just don't do it, it seems. And now that I hear you say that, it's because you didn't have the data before. Right? There was nothing to really analyze because you didn't really have anything to track. But now I think that is important at the end. All right, hey, we're done with this. Let's have some sort of a recap at the end and see what we did. But you just made me realize why that isn't typically a standard part of their process. It's because they just never had the information to do it. There was really nothing to review.
Right. And now you have this wealth, and that's really, well, if you take, Business Central as a whole, whether it's the JAWS module, whether it's, the manufacturing, all of it together, it's, for a company like mine, it's information we never had before. We didn't know what we didn't know. And now you're taking that information about your manufacturing, you're taking that information about your administrative costs and all of those things, and you're tying it all up. And now we're letting our financial team take that information and audit it like they should be doing, and giving us value-added information out of it. So I think that's really where Business Central shines in all aspects of it. And I think the JAWS module really brings it all full circle, because like I said before, everyone focuses on the manufacturing, and it's very easy things to do. How much did it cost us to make it? How much did it cost me to buy it? We didn't know how much it cost me to design it, though, or to manage this project, or to redesign it. Or, you know what, we had these two components already that we designed, but they never went together. So now what is it going to cost me to engineer those two pieces together to make this new request? So that's really where I think Business Central as a whole, with all of these different components that it has to it, can be a very invaluable tool for what you're trying to do and understand what you're doing as business.
So I bet once you guys had all that information available to you when you switched over to NAV or whatnot, it might have been a little bit nerve-wracking, right? Because you're seeing the good and the bad then at that point, right?
Oh yeah,
but in the long term, it's good because you can fix the bad. But
one of the very funny things is when we first started the implementation, one of the things I had stressed to everybody is, we're going to uncover a lot of our dirty secrets that we didn't even know about ourselves.
Right.
There's things that we just didn't even realize, and it's going to be scary, but you just need to own it. We've just got to fix this.
Exactly.
And you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And that's one of the good things about Business Central, is that it's going to tell you what you didn't know about yourself. And I think that it's a very scary realization, because you walk into it thinking you're an expert. I know everything about us. And Business Central lets you when you any ERP system that's properly implemented and that you're using properly is going to let you know you didn't know as much as you thought you knew.
Grounds you.
Yeah, exactly. It's very humbling, I think. And
we've had instances where it's like, hey, look, with jobs, we can now budget engineering hours and track actual engineering hours. And sometimes the engineering manager is in the room and goes, yeah, we're not going to do that to start. maybe phase 2, we'll get to that. Like,
doesn't want anybody to know.
I think I understand
Yeah.
what's happening here. Yeah. So that's interesting. So, so now you've got these long, right? You're manufacturing internally a lot of components that are being used to produce these machines. So some raw materials, and then probably some purchased parts as well that go into there. Obviously, in the last year in the US, and I think worldwide, there have been supply chain disruptions. Has that impacted your business? And if so, how have you maybe used Business Central to help minimize those?
So as everybody that's living in the world right now, we are dealing with that. Business Central has been a very valuable tool. It unfortunately doesn't unpack cargo ships or ship things. It's something that, I think.
Not yet.
In the
Yeah, I was
future.
gonna say, if you can get a module that does that, I'd really appreciate it. But what it has helped us as a company do is identify our inventory turns and what components we actually need and what our higher volume items are that have more frequent inventory turns so that we should have them in stock. So what we've been able to do is use that data and look at, okay, here's what we have in the pipeline. Here's what our average consumption is. You know what? Because there's longer lead times on these things, we should place larger orders now for them so that we can better service our customers. So we're trying to get in front of it. And instead of doing just a blind order everything, we have this on the shelves right now, just get a ton of it. That's not really a good use of our resources or our funding. So really what we decided to do is utilize Business Central to say, okay, these are your high turnover items, these are your longer lead time items. Identify the ones that we can't get from multiple locations, and then really make an informed decision on, okay, we should order a lot of this, or, you know, more than we usually order, just so that we have that in stock so that we can better service our customers. Because it's not only the manufacturing of the machine, because really it's easy to look at, oh, we're going to sell this many next year, we should have this many in stock. It's that information that we've been able to get out of Business Central that tells us, okay, but you consume about this many for service orders, you consume about this many for aftermarket orders. Those are things that sort of get lost because those are, I'm not gonna say they're impulsive sales because they're not impulsive sales, but a machine, when you're buying a, you know, very expensive bagging machine or, you know, any of our larger machines, it's something that you've planned for. This is a, you know, capital expense that you've forecast. You know, with the pandemic and other things like that, there were retooling that needed to happen on some machines. People didn't plan for that. So this was something that was more reactionary. So we needed to make sure that we, you know, looked at that data and, okay, over the last 5 years, looking at those types of sales, what types of components do we need to have in stock? What parts do I need? So that's really been information that we just didn't have previously. And it's helped us a lot in doing that. So like I said, it's real easy to say buy a ton of everything, but that's not a good use of capital. It's or space at all. And this has given us the tools to make informed decisions.
Yeah, and then I think in Business Central, I guess there's probably, it's a combination of three things, right, that you're doing. One is you have this data sitting in Business Central, right? That's there. Sales, consumption, all these inventory ledger entries sitting there, combined with a few custom reports or processes to go recalculate lead times and do a couple things for you, and then Power BI or other reports, right, to kind of now view that data and analyze it.
Yes.
Right?
So that's one of the things that I really can't stress enough, is that the value of the data that's in there, but data is only valuable if you're looking at it. So one of the things, we've done is we've added in data analysts to the group, that their job is to just extract this data and give it to the people, and so that it can be audited. Looking at that, using Power BI, using Jet reports, using just some of the inherent reports to Nav or Business Central. I'm sorry. The name
not the first time.
Yeah,
do it every day.
So it's really what, there's a value to that data, but it's only valuable if you're actually looking at the data. So I think getting, as a director of, Management Information Systems, my job is to manage the distribution of information. And it's not just all that I can keep the computers running, and it's information, whether it's, how that information is being transferred to people. So whether it's via computer, whether it's via, paper document, I just need to get information into your hands, and it needs to be good. So really, that's what, I view my function as, is being the caretaker of that information and delivering it to people in an effective way. So having those business analysts, and people doing those reports, getting it to those people that can audit that is very valuable to any company. And I think that's something that may get overlooked at times. I mean, you're looking at the ERP as this, it's supposed to, do everything, provide world peace and everything. And it's just, you need to work with it.
Yeah.
It needs to be,
Somebody's gonna run it.
It's a tool
yeah,
that you either know how to use or you don't know how to use it, right?
Exactly.
Like I could have a hammer in my hand and I could either build a house or I could smash myself in the toe,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Now, you guys mentioned you're using Power BI. Do you like it?
we love it a lot. I mean, it's very familiar to a lot of people. And I think it's just one of the great things about Microsoft in general is the familiarity of their products. You know, I love when I hear this statement. Power BI just looks like an Excel, you know, looks like an Excel pivot table. Great. I am glad you think that because now I know you're going to use it because you're familiar with it. You're not intimidated by it.
The beauty of Microsoft products.
Yeah.
They kind of look alike.
You know, I prefer Jet Reports. I think I can do a little bit more with it, but it's a little more intimidating for people to go into that. But Power BI, a lot of my end users really respond well to it. It's very graphically, you know, appealing, and it's a high level overview. It's what I need right now.
Exactly. High level overview, some keywords. I love it. I don't think we've mentioned whether or not you're using. Do you got more to talk about the manufacturing and jobs or
No,
supply chain or anything? So I don't think we've mentioned whether you're using on-premise or cloud software over there at Triangle.
So I am using on-prem and a private cloud. So sort of a hybrid.
Hybrid.
Yeah. And well, there's a reason for it.
Just to clarify, right? Business Central on premise.
Yes.
Meaning
Hosted.
you're hosting it yourself
Yeah.
and you have full control over the environment, everything.
Yes.
It happens to be on a private cloud, yeah.
Yes. So the reason for that is, well, there's a lot of reasons for it. So one of the things I'd mentioned is I came into a company that we really were coming out of a system that was not a true ERP system. And if you want to know more about that, go to my original podcast and you can hear all kinds of great stuff about it. But the idea was the scalability of it. I like the idea of going into a infrastructure as a service type of an environment where I can scale it as I need it. And that's what I do love about infrastructure as a service is it's scalable. The reason I didn't use the Azure model at the time was I used a previous iteration of it with SaaS Plaza with Microsoft. Wasn't exactly my favorite flavor of it. And the reason for that was it didn't allow for as much customization as I was going to need. Now, that being said, I really don't want to heavily customize a very good system. You know, Nav/BC is a very good system. It's using a lot of industry standard practices. The problem is you're coming into, you know, as I mentioned, you know, at the time, you know, 90-something-year-old company, you know, at the time, I think 93-year-old. Mm-hmm. We've been doing it this way. So trying to just basically shoehorn everything that they've been doing for 93 years into this very rigid format is just not going to work. I mean, and that's a recipe for failure, is to just completely change everything that everybody's doing and just stop dead. Now this is the new way we're going to do it. And I think that's why a lot of sometimes ERP implementations fail. You're not considering that change management. So going into a hosted environment seemed very rigid to me, whereas I can move into, if I were to have an on-premise license, I can customize it. And while I may not have agreed with all the customizations, I knew that they were stopgap solutions to assist us in getting everybody into the system. Okay, now that I got you acclimated into Business Central and Nav, and you're understanding it. Okay, so now let's start pulling that out, and let's start to get us into more of the business standard way of doing things. And 5 years into this implementation, I was telling Ken earlier today, that we're going to be looking at doing another upgrade, and in that upgrade, we're going to be looking at potentially going with more of a hosted solution or going with more what I would call standard out of the box Business Central, because we've come a long way. If you look at it like this, it's like, you showed a caveman fire, then all of a sudden you're showing them a light bulb. That's a big jump. I mean, Business Central was fire to us. That was something very scary and new, and it's a great tool and it lights things up, but yeah, that's scary to look at. And I think now we're at the point where it's like, okay, I want LED lights everywhere. And I think that's what this latest evolution for us is. So I see the value of both on-prem and the hosted model. I see both, I love cloud in general. Like I said, we're using a private cloud, which is just us hosting with another company. It's not actually an on-premise server. It's our license, but hosted someplace else. But down the road, could I see us getting into a SaaS model? Of course, I see that as a natural evolution of what we're doing. I think that's what a goal of ours should be, is to start operating as a with the standard form of nav or Business Central. And one of the funny things I would tell people is when we were doing the implementation, and they would fight me really hard on it. Why doesn't the system do this? And I would look at them and go, Microsoft's a pretty big company. They've been around for a couple of days now. If they're looking at their ERP system and they're not doing it, should we be doing it?
Yeah.
Like are we really smarter than, and it's sort of a humbling moment that you have to bring people to that. And it's like, we don't know as much as we think we know. Just because we did it this way and we quote unquote worked, doesn't mean it's right.
Correct. Yeah.
So, but I think also if you want to make an ERP implementation fail, I think change everybody's world the minute you put something like this in. So I think you have to do it as a staged approach. And I had told everybody when we first brought Business Central in that I want it to be sort of a non-event when we do phase one. I want to replicate, what we're doing in our current system. I want to definitely get rid of a lot of the bad things, but I don't want to change your whole world. I need you to get used to these new screens. I need you to understand it, and I need you to understand the system.
Right.
Phase two is when we're going to actually start to realize the benefit of this system. And I think, Ken, you've probably you probably hear from me a lot less than you hear from my end users now. Like, I think they're calling you up with more questions, and they're calling you up with more modifications and requests of the system.
Yeah, not even necessarily modifications, but they were crawling and now they're walking and they want to run.
Right.
So it's like, hey, I want to start running now. How do I do this? And I would use the example of job. Let's go back to jobs, which we were talking about, right? When we initially deployed it, the job structure, meaning the number of tasks that were there, or the planning lines that were created, were relatively simple.
Right.
Let's just do a bulk entry for the total amount of engineering. Well, now it's like, how can we do a better job of tracking the actuals versus the budget? We want to break that down with, electrical versus mechanical engineering and budget those separately. How do we do that? Well, we build more tasks.
Right.
And we budget now at that level and we start tracking that level of information. So it's not always customization. It's hey, how can we change our setup, or what can we do to improve the use of this module?
And goes back to the point of the value of the data. So now you start looking at that data and you started saying, well, wait a minute now. Something that I didn't think was valuable, now it's missing things. Yeah. I need more data out of it. So now you've actually just increased the value of what I'm able to capture. Now they're asking you for, okay, can we, how do I capture this? When I think customizations, it's not so much changing the way it's doing things. It's, can I add this field in because I want to be able to get this data out of there now, and I want to start tracking this. One of the things I just spoke to Simeon about today was I need to add a date stamp or a timestamp. And right now I'm only getting date stamps on certain transactions. I need timestamps with it as well. So, these are things that it's like, okay, we have it. We didn't even know we needed it. Now we're using it. It's like, wait a minute, this is great. I need more.
Taking it to that next level.
And that's what I love. And the other part that I love is, and what I was going to, is that you're hearing from, the users, which is really what is the most important to me, is because I want to be the caretaker of the system. And I mentioned that as, my job is I'm the caretaker of the information, caretaker of the system. And that's really where my function is. But the users need to own it. The fact that they're calling you up, the fact that they're trying to evolve it and get more data out of it, that's really where the win comes in for me, is that they're owning this. They feel a ownership of the system. And that's what's going to move this whole thing forward, is them owning it. Because if it's an IT solution, I'm going to be very rigid about it, and it's going to be very logical.
Yeah.
And it's an illogical world.
Curious to know, excuse me, you said you're a lover of cloud and as the caretaker of the system, would eventually moving to a SaaS-based model scare you from like a security standpoint or no? Because I guess you don't have as much control.
You don't have as much control, but I think there's, things that you can put in place. Well, first off, I look at it like this. I mean, here, I do as much as I can to prevent it. And, if someone's really gonna like do an organized attack, I mean, they can get into, every one of them's been hacked, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's
Right.
Amazon, whether it's Sony. They've been hacked. They have more money than I do. But they also have people that are sitting there 24/7, and there's teams of people watching it. So there's a more concerted effort to get into them. We, have put a lot of money into our security. So, do I think that I'm any more protected by not being? No, I'm not under that delusion that if I put it, I mean, that's like saying that my money's safer in a mattress, in a shoebox under my mattress than it is in a bank. Well, okay, I guess, but it's not a realistic way of looking at it. I mean, I think that's the difference. Is to me, that's keeping it on premises. That's shoebox under the mattress. So, I mean, I'm hoping that most of the people that are listening to this have a bank account.
I would imagine so.
Then there we go. So it's a very similar concept.
Our target market's got it.
Yeah.
Most of them.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
And that's how I view SaaS versus, on-prem.
Right.
But, once again, you have to crawl before you walk.
Definitely
and I think it's just introducing that into our environment more slowly and getting us into a more standard operating, environment and getting us out of our bad habits. And, I love that our leadership has a very defined plan of using Business Central in its standard format. How do, I hear this comment all the time, and it makes me smile when I hear this, is what does out of the box Business Central work like? I'm glad you asked that. Let's get there. And I think that's really where we want to be as a company. And I think, it's an evolution to get there. So I think that starting off as a on-prem is definitely, that crawling stage. I think, running marathons is when we get into a fully hosted SaaS model.
Gotcha.
All right. Well, thank you for spending some time with us and sharing your insights with the listeners.
We definitely appreciate it. Thanks for teaching us a little bit more about wine than what we knew.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me today. I love it.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Hopefully we'll be back next year for the
Cheers.
holiday edition.